Mrs. Somerville, Mary, it is so good to see you. I have been working very hard, like the devil, in fact, which perhaps I am. Oh, Mr. Dickens! To you I give the pleasure of being custodian of the string. We shall need that later when I explain how Mr. Babbage's analytical engine works. Oh, my dear friends. The evening is just beginning and we have so much to speak of. Mr. Charles Babbage has invited me to prepare a translation of the Menabrea analysis of his analytical engine. He has also suggested that I add my own notes with the intention to publish. And I understand the potential of his machine far more than he does. That is Ada Lovelace. So with a show of hands, who'd heard of Ada Lovelace before today? Interesting. What we're saying, about 30% of the people here? And what about Charles Babbage? He's familiar? Okay, maybe a few more. What about his difference engine? A couple? Oh, you guys at the back, hello. And what about the analytical engine? Gosh, quite a few. Well, here's a fact. Did you know that Ada Lovelace's father is Lord Byron? Yeah, just a few. She is the only legitimate child of his. Yes. Infamous poet, Luddite, scandal of his age, mad, bad, and dangerous to know. Her mother, on the other hand, is Anne Isabella Milbank, better known as Annabella. She is of noble birth, a strict religious upbringing, and unusual for a woman of her generation, an extensive education in mathematics. Well, as you might have guessed, their marriage didn't last. And when Ada was just 5 weeks old, Annabella chose to leave Byron, taking young Ada with her. She also determined, as a mathematician herself, that she would remove from Ada all of Byron's creative, romantic, poetic tendencies with a strict course in advanced mathematics. Luckily for us, she retains her creativity and is brilliant at maths. She was, though, also a very sickly child. And when she was 13 years old, she became so ill that she lost the use of her legs. Annabella made sure she stayed in bed for a year. Annabella was a severe woman. And while she was rarely at home, she made sure Ada continued with her maths and stayed in bed. Here's a letter from Ada to her mother. Dearest Mamma, since last night, I have been thinking more about the flying. I can find no difficulty in the motion and distension of the wings, and I have already thought of a way of fixing them to the shoulders. I think they might perhaps be made of oil silk, or if that does not answer, I will try what I can do with feathers. I know you will laugh at what I am about to say, but I am going to take the exact patterns of a bird's wing in proportion to its size, and then I'm immediately going to set about making a pair of paper wings in proportion to my size. But I do not think that without plates I could be made thoroughly to understand the anatomy of a bird, and I have no inclination whatever to dissect even a bird. Once I have got flying to perfection, I am going to create a thing in the form of a horse with a steam engine on the inside so as to move an immense pair of wings. Supposing I fly well by the time you return, Mamma, you would present me with a crown of laurels, but only on condition that I fly tolerably well. Your pigeon. At the age of 14, Ada regains the use of her legs, and I am Augusta Ada Byron. It is true, my mother Annabella was a mathematician, and my father, Lord Byron, named a great poet. But I do not believe that he is such a poet, as I shall be an analyst and a metaphysician. For in me, the two things go together indisputably. This brain of mine is more than merely mortal, as time will show, and I have a peculiar way of learning, and it shall take a peculiar man to teach me successfully. At the age of 15, she sleeps with her tutor. She is her father's daughter. 2 years later, in 1833, Ada meets Mr. Charles Babbage. Mr. Charles Babbage, he's an extraordinary inventor and mathematician. He's eccentric, charismatic, and stubborn. If he were alive today, he'd probably host his own TV show. When Ada meets him, he's hosting one of his impressive salons, his social gatherings, attended by all the great intellectuals and the scientific minds of the day. He is demonstrating the only model of the difference engine. It is at this salon that the 17-year-old Ada has her first encounter with the incredible invention. Babbage is passionate about it, while his guests see it more as a novelty. But when Ada sees it, she really sees it and its potential. Let me explain. The difference engine is an automatic mechanical calculator. The difference engine is an automatic mechanical calculator designed to tabulate polynomial functions. The name derives from the method of divided differences, a way to interpolate and tabulate functions based on a small set of polynomials. Most tables used by engineers and navigators, such as trigonometric and logarithmic tables, may be approximated by polynomials. This invention will compute tables without the use of human computers, which are so prone to the errors of the human mind. The difference engine will generate error-free tables to be used globally, and this is the Industrial Revolution. The difference engine has the power to transform industry and expand the British Empire. And the British government knew it. They'd already invested in Babbage the decent sum of £1,700 so that he would complete his difference engine, followed by the significant amount of money of £17,500, which at the time was the equivalent budget they put aside to build 2 of the Duke of Wellington's battleships. So how much do you reckon a battleship is these days? How much do you reckon it would cost to build a battleship? Go on, shout something out. Anyone, what do you reckon? 5 million. Higher. How much? 100 million. I heard 1 billion, and you at the back are absolutely correct. But you know this because the British government happens to have commissioned a fleet of battleships in the last decade, and they paid €1 billion per battleship. So back in Ada Lovelace's day, they had funded Babbage the equivalent of €2 billion so that he would complete his empire-building mechanical automatic calculator. Babbage is intrigued, enchanted by this young intellect and kindred spirit. They soon become friends and intellectual collaborators and begin a lifelong correspondence in which Ada is known as the Enchantress, outlandish, and even the General. My dear Babbage, I see far greater things for your invention than you do, my friend. Mrs. Somerville, Babbage is merely talking about his invention. The beautiful model in his drawing room does not function, and society is treating it as no more than a novelty. I've always fancied Babbage to be a little harum-scarum and inaccurate. He's 24 years my senior, yet I do not believe he has half my foresight or powers for foreseeing all possible contingencies. It is now 1835. Ada is of marrying age. She's 19. Babbage and I have discussed the idea of marriage, but Mamma does not hold with it. His wealth is adequate, but it is new money. On the 8th of July, 1835, Ada is married to William King, 8th Baron King. Within a year, they have their first child. Within 3, they have another boy and a girl. Ada's mother, throughout this period, continues to be an oppressive and overbearing force in Ada's life, particularly when Ada is weak due to persistent ill health. Ada is now a wealthy Victorian woman. It is now 1838, and Queen Victoria ascends the throne, and in celebration of her accession, she bestows the Earldom of Lovelace upon Ada's husband, making him Lord Lovelace. And, my dear friends, I am Augusta Ada, Countess of Lovelace. Ada, as a wealthy woman, has very little to occupy her mind. She's utterly bored. But I'm not going to talk about her having affairs, nor am I going to talk about how she renounces Christianity in favor of atheism, nor will I talk about how she becomes addicted to opium by taking her laudanum prescription for pleasure. And I won't talk about her gambling. But as you can imagine, Ada's mother and husband are distraught, and Annabella proceeds to destroy correspondence both to and from Ada, anything that could insinuate Ada in a scandal. One near scandal that appears in a letter that Ada's mother didn't burn is that her circle, one of her circle, was blackmailing her, threatening to tell her husband and mother about Ada's vast gambling debts. Perhaps this is the catalyst for a renewed vigor in mathematics. It is now the early 1840s, and Ada is in her late 20s. I must cease to think of living for pleasure and self-gratification, and I can find but one sort of excitement, if indeed it can be called by that name, that I think allowable to me at present, viz. That of study and intellectual improvement. I find that nothing but the very close and intense application to subjects of a mathematical nature now at all seems to keep my imagination from running wild, or to stop up the void which seems to appear in my mind from want of excitement. In developing his difference engine, Babbage has struck upon the idea of a truly general-purpose machine, which he has called the Analytical Engine. The new Analytical Engine renders the difference engine obsolete. Okay, now the reason the difference engine is obsolete is it is merely a calculator. The Analytical Engine, on the other hand, is a computer. The work of Ada Lovelace with Charles Babbage in 1843 is the beginning of our computer age. The new Analytical Engine shall be built of brass gears, powered by steam, with input given on punched cards, much as the Jacquard loom uses punched cards. Okay, so who's heard of the Jacquard loom? Anyone? Okay, for the rest of you, here's the skinny. The jacquard loom, first demonstrated in 1801, is a mechanical loom that simplifies the process of manufacturing complex textiles such as damask and brocade, a process that prior to the jacquard loom involved 2 weavers. The jacquard loom involves just 1 weaver, while a continuous chain of cards with holes punched into them engages with a thread based on whether there is a hole or no hole. A bit like a knitting machine. And it was a form of binary and was how the analytical engine would work. It was a miraculous leap in technology. This is a miraculous leap in engineering. And Mr. Charles Babbage has invited me to prepare a translation of the Menabrea analysis of his analytical engine. He has also suggested that I add my own thoughts with the intention to publish. And I understand the potential of his machine far more than he does. Okay, so who's heard of the Menabrea analysis? Anyone? Menabrea analysis? Okay, it is an essay written in French by an Italian based on Babbage's description of the analytical engine. The analytical engine itself was never built because it was not funded. But it would have worked. So let's build it now. Okay? I'm going to need your help and the string. Right. So, over here, if you'd like to look under your chair, you should find somewhere around there a card. In fact, everyone, look under your chairs, sort of around the front area here. And if you see a card, pick it up and hold it above your head so I can make sure that you've got them all. Okay. We've got the store, the number card reader, the variable card reader, another store, we've got the printer, the bell, the operation card reader, the plus, the divides, the minus, the multiplies. There's another card around there. Someone might need to move. So yes, if you would like to be the mill, fantastic. Okay, I think we have everything. Okay, now we need to connect it up. The analytical engine was connected up by hundreds of thousands of levers, gears, and cogs, and if we did that, we'd be here till Christmas. So we're going to use string. Number card reader, have you found the string? Yes. Can you pass it to your neighbour? Thank you. So number card reader, I'm sure you have a name. What's your name? Yes. Maya. And string, what's your name? Rosa. Maya and Rosa. Okay, so number card, for the purpose of this exercise, we are going to have everything start at the number card reader, yeah? Maya, I want you to imagine that you're flying a kite because we need lots and lots of string. So you hold on to the spool, pass the tail of the string to Maya. Did I say Rosie? Yeah, Rosa. And then keep running it out because what you're going to do is you're going to hold on to the string but pass the tail down to the store. Okay, so keep your cards high so people can see everything. So it needs to go down to the store, all the way along the store and down to the variable card reader. And while you're doing that, I'm going to explain a few things that made the analytical engine so amazing. What made it so amazing is that it was made up of the 3 main components of a modern day computer. How's that string doing? Okay, we need to have the string go through the store all the way along to the end and then down, otherwise it's not going to work. Okay? So these components were the store, which is the memory in a modern computer, the mill, which is the processor of a modern day computer, and the printer, which, because it printed out all the answers to the equations, it's effectively the screen of a modern day computer. How's that string? Okay, it's with the variable card reader. Just hold on there for a moment. Now, this was a big machine. At 45 meters wide, it was almost the size of one of the Duke of Wellington's battleships. And it was powered by steam. Okay, from the variable card reader, you're going to hold on to it, but pass the tail back up into the store. Okay? So keep hold of it. Don't strangle yourself by doing this. Keep yourself safe, everyone. Keep the string coming, and from that store point, it's going to go over to the mill. So someone might need to help transfer the string. So store, you need to hold on to it. Things are very busy at your junction. Lots of things going on. So you should have 2 pieces of string now. That's it. Bring it back, otherwise it won't work. Back into the mill and down to the operation card reader. So hold on to it and pass it down. So you've got 3 card readers. You've got the number card reader, which tells the store which number to use. You've got the variable card reader, which tells the store where to find the numbers. You've got the operation card reader, which tells the mill which operation to perform on the numbers, which is plus, divides, multiplies, minus. So from the operation card, it's going to go back up into the mill. Yes, that's it. And once it gets to the mill, it needs to go round all those operations and back to you. Again, you're going to be busy with the string. So you've got 2 points of string now, and you're going to get a third in a minute, so hold on to those. So it goes around all those operations. Minus, plus, divides, multiplies. That's it. That's it. Yep. And this analytical engine could perform an equation on 2 numbers at a time. But here's the real beauty. It could do an equation and then store the answer to be used on a subsequent equation without anyone having to get involved. So how's that string doing? You made it around the operations and back into the mill, back into the mill, back into the mill. And once it goes to the mill, you're going to cross over and back into the store. Keep it. It's not going to work, guys. Keep up with it. Okay, and over to the store, and once it goes across the whole store, it goes down to the printer. Down in front, printer's in front, down to the printer, hold on to it, otherwise it's not going to work, and out to the bell. Now let's see if that bell works. Could you give your bell a wave? There we go. You are now the analytical engine. Okay, give them a round of applause. The analytical engine is here. Now, everyone involved in the analytical engine, I need you to stand up because we're going to take it for a spin. Okay, you ready? So what we're going to do is when I call out your section, you're going to wave your card in the air and tug the string and see how that affects other parts in the machine. So I don't see some string in your hands, number card reader. Hold on to the string. And now I need you to pull together all the slats so that you can really affect each other, like those cogs, levers and gears would. And we will see it chugging away, okay? So, Maya, are you ready? Yes, excellent, you can tug. Brilliant, so let's just do practice. I'm going to call out you, and then you give it a good tug, and then I'll call out the store, and you give it a good tug. You got that? Tug when you hear your name of the area you're in. Okay, so you act as the mill, all you operations. Yeah. Okay, so the number card reader reads the first number into the store. Bit faster, please. Let's get this up to speed. Okay, you ready? Ready to give it a good tug? I want to see these people almost falling over. Yeah? Okay, and the number card reader reads the first number into the store. Look, guys, come on. Wave those cards, tug that string. Everyone, give it a practice. Excellent. This is more like it. Okay, the number card reads the first number into the store. The variable card reads the location into the store. The number card reads the second number into the store. The variable card reader reads the location into the store. The store passes the 2 numbers over to the mill. The operation card reads the operation into the mill. The mill processes and passes it back. Yay! And passes it back into the store. This happens many, many times. Passing it in, processing many times until all the numbers are done and it passes it over and the operation card triggers to the printer to print the numbers and the bell rings. Woohoo! And relax. Keep hold of your string and things. We'll do a sum later. Now as you imagine orchestrating all these punched cards into 3 separate card readers. It's a real conundrum, but this is where Ada Lovelace excels by combining her abstract creative thinking with methodical problem solving. I have been hard at work all day, intending to send to you my diagram of instructions quite complete. My dear Babbage, together we are going to create something truly phenomenal. The analytical engine does not hold common ground with mere calculating machines. Ada Lovelace's Diagram of Instructions, as published as Note G in 1843, is the world's first complex computer program. And she creates this for the analytical engine that wasn't built, because the government had withdrawn all of Babbage's funding because he failed to complete the difference engine. She created it for a mechanical computer that was never going to be built, and she did it by looking at 5,000 drawings by Babbage. And for her program, she chose the Bernoulli numbers. So who's heard of a Bernoulli number? Anyone? Any mathematicians in the house? They are incredibly difficult to explain and really difficult to create before there were computers. Ada has a description. These numbers appear in the Taylor series expansion, so the tangent and the hyperbolic tangent functions, and in formulas for the sum of the powers of the first positive integers. Any wiser? Well, the good news is we don't actually need to know what a Bernoulli number is in order to appreciate just how extraordinary her achievement was. And I will say, though, that before there were computers, when a Bernoulli number was generated by a mathematician by hand, it was recorded in history. I have chosen the Bernoulli numbers for my program as they are an example of how the implicit function may be worked out by the analytical engine without having been worked out by human head or hands first. And Bernoulli numbers are so prone to the errors of the human mind. Okay, so let's create a Bernoulli number with our analytical engine. No, don't worry, I'm not going to do that. Okay, but let's do a sum. Okay, so if those involved with the analytical engine, if you stand up, get your string all taut, your cards ready to wave, and we're going to do some sums using the power of the analytical engine. Okay, so number card reader. Maya, you need to give me a number, okay, when I call out. Any number. The machine could do 40 digits, including decimal places. So you can give us a big number, okay? Decimal places, good. And Mr. Operation Card Reader, what's your name? I'm going to guess, not being able to hear you. Oh, what is your name, sir? Raymond? Redmond. Thank you. Now, you need to come up with an operation. That's plus, minus, don't really use those. Multiplies, divides, okay? You ready? Okay, so you're going to have to call it out, and everyone help transfer it to me in case I don't hear the numbers, okay? So, the number card reads the first number into the store. 8,568. The variable card gives us the location into the store. The number card gives us the second number into the store. 5,577. The variable card reads the location. Keep tugging into the store. The store passes the two numbers over to the mill. And operation card reader gives us an operation. Multiplies. And the mill does its processing. Passes it back into the store. The number card gives us another number into the store. 278. The variable card gives the location into the store. The store passes the two numbers over to the mill. Operation, please. Divides into the mill, does its processing. Over to the store. The number card gives us another number into the mill, into the store. 847. The variable card reads the location into the store. The store passes the two numbers over to the mill. The operation gives us an operation. Multiplies. And the mill multiplies it, passes it back to the store. The operation card now tells the store to print it. And the printer prints out the answer. And the answer is... Thank you. And relax. Human error. I think we prefer having our computers, don't we? Thank you. The machine doesn't mind how complicated it is. It's humans that make mistakes. In developing my diagram of instructions, I corrected Babbage, as even he made mistakes in the calculations. A new, vast, and powerful language is created for the future use of analysis so that it may be of more speedy and accurate application for the benefit of mankind. I must Twitter this. Okay, no, she didn't say that last bit. But she has just created software, complete with line-by-line instructions, looping, and conditional branching. The Analytical Engine has no pretensions to originate anything, but it can do whatever we know how to order it to perform. We may say the Analytical Engine shall weave algebraic patterns, just like the jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves. And like the jacquard loom, it shall weave a fine pattern of knowledge, whatever we ask of it, not by its own thinking, no, but it's what we order it to divine. Therein lies the magic. Signing her notes, A.A.L., Ada publishes in 1843. But what perhaps might be the most remarkable aspect to Ada Lovelace and Charles Babbage's monumental achievement in thought and engineering is the extent to which it was ignored. And instead, it took a whole century before we reach Alan Turing and his team in Bletchley Park and the enigma-cracking mechanical computer. Ada is now 28 years old, and she is in her element. But this happiness is not going to last. Dearest Mamma, I have been very ill and more suffering than yet. But I've been working very hard. I think you would be pleased. Today I have rallied considerably. In August of 1850, Ada is diagnosed with uterine cancer. Annabella enters back into Ada's life and dominates her and her household completely. She withholds pain-numbing opiates. She destroys more correspondence. She forces Ada to repent and return to Christianity. She also insists that Ada confess to her husband her sins. We don't have a record of what Ada actually told her husband at that confession, but we do know, since my confession, my husband will not attend me. A mamma forbids any friends visit, for she fears they excite me and may render me a pagan. Today, she has allowed a visitor, dear, kind Mr. Dickens, and he is reading to me from his latest serialization, viz. The Death of Carker in Dombey and Son, an honour I am allowing him, as ordinarily I would be fearful of divulging the ending prior to publication. It's amusing. It is a death scene he's reading. But it's beautifully read, enough to make my heart ache and my soul take flight. Ada Lovelace is on her deathbed. She's just 36 years old, the same age as her father was when he died. She's separated from her society. She's in excruciating pain, left to her mother. The disappearance of Ada Lovelace has begun even prior to her death. And it is 90 years before we see the first real influence of Ada's insight into our computer age. In the same decade as his work in Bletchley Park, Alan Turing refers to Ada's work as what he dubs the Lovelace objection. What he's referring to in the context of artificial intelligence is Ada's statement that the analytical engine has no pretensions to originate anything, but it can do whatever we know how to order it to perform. He publishes his seminal paper in 1950, and Ada's notes enter the public domain once again. And they are discussed by the nascent computer science community. But as she is a woman, they also debate whether she wrote her notes, which actually is quite ironic because in the 1940s and 1950s, it was largely women doing all the programming. And then in the 1960s, we have Amazing Grace Hopper. And it's Amazing Grace Hopper who comes up with the idea to use words instead of numbers for computer programming. And I'm not talking about the programming languages, I'm actually talking about words, where it means that you no longer have to be a mathematician to be a programmer. We can all do it. So where Ada Lovelace, in her diagram of instructions, used numbers and symbols for her conditional branching, it's thanks to the work started by Amazing Grace Hopper that we now have, if this happens, then this happens. Then in the 1970s, it is the US military that honors Ada by naming a computer language after her. Any ideas? Anyone know what that is? Ada. ADA. And Ada, the programming language, is everywhere. It's used in your mobile phone networks. It's used in air traffic control. It's even used for satellites. Ada is flying. But throughout history, she also had her critics. I'm going to read you just one. You ready? What has become apparent is the presence of misogyny. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong page. It happens, it's a notebook. It would only be a slight exaggeration to say that Babbage wrote the notes to Menabre's paper, but for reasons of his own, encouraged the illusion in the minds of Ada and the public that they were authored by her. It is no exaggeration to say that she was a manic depressive with the most amazing delusions about her own talents and a rather shallow understanding of both Charles Babbage and the Analytical Engine. To me, correspondence between Ada and Babbage seems to make obvious once again that Ada was as mad as a hatter and contributed little more to the notes than trouble. Any ideas when that was written? Any ideas? 1990s. Yeah. This is how I'd like to think that if Ada had the opportunity to respond, she might respond like this. What has become apparent is the presence of sexism in our society still. It appears difficult for our society to allow the intellect of a woman, and when presented with a female mind as an equal amongst men, they cry insanity and fraud and ego. It appears our society is ready to omit half its intelligent thought, to overlook the innovations that women may bring our nation, that we may bring the world, in favour of a blindness of sexism. Alone, forgotten. Back in 1852, Ada dies a horrible, painful death. She did get the last dig in, though. In her last will and testament, she insisted that she be buried next to her father, much to her mum's annoyance. She also bequeathed the possessions that Lord Byron had left to her to a gentleman friend. Let us imagine, what if Ada wasn't born in 2015? What if she was born in 1815? What if she was born 200 years later in 2015? Okay, so she would have to get past this sexism. We do have a bit of that going on still. Did you know that in the UK, that less than 10% of all the people working in technology are women? That's less women in tech than there were 20 years ago. And we're not talking about an arcane industry, we're talking about the pioneering industry of technology. And in this industry also, in senior positions, there are less than 10% women. And what's worse is that it appears that young women seeking to skill up for a career in technology is dropping to 9%. And that, in turn, will lead to fewer women in technology to be role models for the next generation. But we have an opportunity. You will know the story of Ada Lovelace now. So whenever someone turns to you and suggests that there isn't a role for women in science and technology and engineering and maths, and in fact, anything, you can use her story to say that's absolute rubbish. So, let's imagine. What if Ada was born in 2015? And by the time she's 15 years old, there are plenty of women in tech to inspire her. And she is brilliant at maths, she's incredibly creative, and she doesn't get too distracted. And then, in 2033, she meets her equivalent of Charles Babbage. No, she meets Charlotte Babbage. And now she is in her prime. I'd like to think that she is a senior TED Fellow giving a TED Talk to millions across the future equivalent of YouTube. Hello, my name